This is some information about the Matrix program, phase 1, which is the intensive phase of the program. The intensive phase of the program is the first 20 weeks of attendance, and this is where a participant is required to attend a minimum of 3 sessions a week at the group program. As you can see down on the slide here, the first 20 weeks, there are several components to the intensive phase, what we call the early recovery phase, relapse prevention, family and education sessions, as well as social support. It does include early intervention skills such as psychoeducation, understanding about how the brain works, understanding about skills and strategies. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So those first 20 weeks is quite intensive. It does require the person to attend a minimum of 3 sessions a week. We have 6 sessions a week, Monday to Saturday, at various times. Some days we have them in the evening, some in the morning, and there is a Saturday afternoon session. Each session goes for 2 hours and contains specific topics that are scheduled to do. There's a variety of topics over the 48 weeks that people attend, but they will be repeating some of the topics, especially some of the early recovery skills. This is done deliberately. The reason being is that as people journey in their recovery, different things happen at different times, and it's important for them to review the content of the topics that they did when they came in and see how they're changing as they progress. Some key points to understand about the intensive phase. It is 20 weeks, but it can be extended, and it generally is about how the person is in recovery, some of the factors that may be affecting their recovery, and just if they're needing that extra attention, that extra commitment and connection to the group. During the intensive phase, as I've said, participants need to commit to at least 3 sessions a week. Participants can come more, but they must be able to commit to at least 3 group sessions a week. During the early stages in recovery, mood monitoring and scheduling are very critical in terms of managing any potential relapse. The importance of scheduling and monitoring. This has a huge focus in the Matrix program. Scheduling is an essential part of the Matrix program. It brings structure into the life of where normally addiction is disorganization and chaos. So what scheduling encompasses is that the participants will be given a scheduling log, and in that scheduling log, they document what they're going to do throughout the week. Now, most of the people in our Matrix program work. So as you can imagine, work takes up a lot of time, especially if it's full-time work. And then in that early stage, you're coming to group 3 times a week. So that's another part of the scheduling, is making sure that I get to these places on time. In addiction, people tend to run late. They tend to run on an anxiety-fueled time of managing and meeting commitments, and we want to slow that all down. That's why scheduling is really important. How do I start to live my life in a more orderly fashion? Also, managing our self-care, because sometimes people forget that when they're trying to meet the demands, because addiction takes up so much space, and some of those healthy self-care activities tend to get left behind. So making sure that I'm waking up at the same time each morning, I brush my teeth, I have a shower, I eat breakfast. Scheduling in our food intake is important. Another thing that can happen when we go into the early stages of recovery is because we're not using the substance anymore, something else wants to start filling us up. People tend to move then to either drinking too many energy drinks, too much coffee, or there's a space there, so it starts to get filled up with a potential secondary addiction. So cigarette smoking may increase, junk food eating, lolly eating, chewing gum. all of these behaviours. And what scheduling helps us do is to make sure that we have structured things in the day that don't necessarily give space for us to start to develop other types of habits that are not necessarily helpful. What we do know is that those people in the program who have the greatest success actually regularly schedule and regularly attend the groups as often as possible. Our monitoring is another task that we do in early recovery. This is where we keep a check on our moods, our sleep, and our exercise. What this does is it helps us check in with how we're traveling, whether our anxiety is starting to increase, whether our depression's starting to increase, whether we notice that our sleep's being disrupted, if there's a bit more conflict in our life. Are we exercising? So all of these behaviours are really important. We start to then develop an awareness how my day has been. And generally, these are very, very useful in actually predicting a relapse later. Speaking of relapses, the intensive phase of 20 weeks is only completed after 20 weeks of abstinence while in the Matrix program. What that means is that if someone does relapse during that time, they are then needing to come to a relapse analysis individual session with one of our team. We get them back into the program as soon as possible. And that does depend on the substance that they've used and how their detox and withdrawal goes after they've used the substance. Generally, we like to get people back into the group between 3 to 5 days after they've relapsed. Now, when they do come back into the group, they go back to day one. I know that may feel a little bit, and it does for some people if they do relapse, if they've been going along really, really well and they've mastered, 15 weeks of recovery and then they relapse, going back to day one really is a struggle. But it's part of the program, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One is that we're always monitoring what stage of change the brain is in. And we know that when a relapse occurs, the brain's affected again. So we want to make sure that we understand that there's certain things that happen at certain times, like I said earlier, and when the brain's at different stages of being without the substance, it starts to go into other areas of recovery. So, for example, when a person's been between 90 and 120 days abstinent, what happens is we talk about hitting the wall. When a person hits the wall at that point, they start to experience some really challenging behavior. Maybe their cravings goes up, their sleep gets disrupted. Some people actually go through a bit like a honeymoon stage, and we understand this by how many days abstinent they are. So really it's a timekeeper for us in terms of the neurobiological healing that's happening. The other thing that can happen too when we go back to day one is some people have put in a lot of hard work, and when they realize they go back to day one, it's another motivator not to relapse again. And people have used that to keep them going at times when they know that the choice to relapse became a little bit easier. They go, I'm now 200 days abstinent. I just don't want to go back to day one. And if that's enough to keep them motivated and engaged in their recovery at that point in time, then that's important. There is a relapse recovery procedure that people go through when they first join. So once the person joins and goes into the intensive phase, they do quite a few sessions just preparing them for the journey ahead. And one of those is a unique and specific to the individual relapse recovery procedure. Throughout the time in the Matrix program, there'll be many topics that the person goes through. And as you can see here, it's quite comprehensive. It covers many aspects of recovery. the early recovery skills, relapse prevention, social support, and our family education sessions. So it covers all aspects of life, and it also covers many domains, many potential pitfalls that people can experience during this period. Our early recovery skills, the key message of this is that you can change your behaviour in ways that will make it easier to stay abstinent. The early recovery sessions will teach strategies and provide practice time to do these strategies. So this is all about, how do I manage my internal triggers? How do I manage my external triggers? Do I even know what my internal and external triggers are? How do I interrupt the thoughts and the cravings that could potentially lead me to a relapse? What is the pathway in terms of the physical impact of my withdrawal? So in those early stages, how do I know what I'm feeling? I need to check in with my moods, but also I need to be aware of what my body's going through during that detox phase, and what my mind is actually, how it's managing some of the thoughts that in the past maybe I've used the substance to be able to manage these thoughts. Now I need to do that without using the substance. So these are some of the skills in early recovery. The relapse prevention topics, the goal of these is to understand and be able to identify the signs of relapse early so it can be prevented. These sessions focus on basically what we call relapse prediction and prevention. The first part of this is recognizing and understanding myself. What are my triggers to relapse? What are the potential? This is where we use your mood chart. This is also where we use your scheduling. Have I got people, places, or situations coming up in my schedule over the next week that are potential relapses? So there may be people that I have used substances with. It may be situations like a concert that I've gone to, and where in the past I've either been drinking or smoking or using. Or it might even be places. So driving past a dealer's house, driving past a liquor shop. These are all potential for relapse. So knowing where I'm going to be over the next week, looking at my schedule, identifying potential risk factors helps me avoid a potential relapse. The other part too is noticing behavior change. When I notice on my mood logs that I'm not as active as normally I've been, or maybe I've been having or experiencing a lot of pain or sleeplessness, I'm not doing my meditation practice or my exercising, and these are really good for my recovery. I might notice also that mentally I'm starting to having a few more thoughts about, I can't keep doing this. Why does that person annoy me? I just can't let certain things go. So I start thinking about things over and over and over again. And the behavior change along with some of those thoughts actually starts me withdrawing. So normally I might be present in my partner's life. I might be engaging with the kids. I might be able to focus at work. But what I start to notice is I just want to be by myself. And that is a good indicator that there's a potential relapse happening soon. The social support topics help you move away from substances and towards a lifestyle based on being healthy and substance-free. What we focus on with these topics is about redeveloping the aspects of our life that maybe have been influenced or maybe permeated by the substance and addictive behaviours. So we look at the friendships in our life. What we find is a lot of people who've been in substance use for a while, they've either lost some of their close friendships that they had that were not involved with substances, or they've got a lot of friends, but all those friends are involved in substance using, and it's very difficult to meet with those friends because they are still using substances. We see this happens quite a lot with people who use alcohol and come into the program because alcohol has been a problem. They know now they can't drink alcohol. And so meeting their friends at the pub on a Friday night is just something that they can't do at this point in time while they're in early recovery. How do we manage that? And that's what these social support topics talk about. Developing new leisure and hobbies. Sometimes in addiction, those leisure activities and the hobbies we used to do are either ones we engaged in when we were under the influence, or we let them go because being under the influence was not conducive to be able to engage in those anymore. Same as exercise and self-care. These are important parts of our recovery. How do I start to do them differently? How do I do them better? And in some cases, I need to start doing them. Our family and education support sessions are attended by the person in the recovery program and also their family and support people. These sessions provide information related to addiction and recovery. So that it's about how the family member and support people can support someone in recovery. How do they understand what to look for when there's a possible relapse? What do they do when the person that they care about is struggling with problems? How do they provide that support without enabling them? More importantly, family and supports need support also. And that's a big element of the family education session. And what gets said to us quite a bit is about the fact that people that come along to the family and support education sessions, they really feel supported by other people who are also experiencing the same thing. We know for family members, when they've been living with someone who's going through a substance use problem, that it becomes quite isolating for them also. Sometimes they can feel embarrassed about the other person's addiction. Sometimes other people in their life have stopped listening, stopped caring, especially if it's been going on for a long time, or they become other people start to provide advice that's not necessarily helpful. And so family members and friends who are supporting that person in recovery start to feel more isolated and less able to speak about some of the things that they're concerned about. So these sessions are really important in providing that support to family members. They're also really important in learning about and understanding about the addiction pathway and the recovery. The recovery journey is not simple. It's very complex, and there's many ups and downs and struggles.
I'm sorry.
Key point is the Matrix is an open-ended program, and what that means is that participants can join at any time. So when a person joins a Matrix program, they might find that in that group that day, there might be people at different stages in their recovery. So there might be people who've been in the program for a month. There might be people who've been in the program for 2 months. There might be people who are just about to graduate. And sometimes our graduates come back. And so there'll be people who have already graduated the program and can share along with others just some encouragement and mentorship around what's been helpful and useful for them during their time in the program. The wisdom is in the group, and people are at different stages in their journey, and that's the important part of it, is to see that recovery is very much possible, and life on the other side of this journey without substances offers so much more. Our team that facilitate the program, there's a psychologist, clinical psychologist, and a clinical nurse. The people who facilitate the Matrix program at Ashcliffe are all registered health professionals. So this is some of the team who, if you are coming into our intensive phase, you're likely to meet. And finally, welcome to recovery. If you are interested in more information about the program, this is just a brief snapshot of what the intensive phase looks like. Please give us a call on 0421 177 901 or email us matrix@ashcliffe.com.au.